My father turned away from the radio, tears in his eyes, and he lined up his four sons, but he lined us all up and he said, listen, boys, they won't take me because I'm too old, but I expect my sons to, immigrant citizens here were the most patriotic people in the world. They knew what it was like in their own country, and they loved this country when they got here. He said, this nation must not fail. Understand, boys? Nowhere in the entire world can a man come here with nothing. And look at us today. We have a home and a car and a job, and my kids are all being educated. Boys, he said, this country must not fail. And I believe, ladies and gentlemen, that those became the defining words of my life.
All right. Good morning. We're going to try this by chat.
Nod your head if you hear me well.
I hear you well. So we're excited to have Mr. Speranza, even though he can't hear us. We can hear him well. So I'm going to let Mr. Speranza tell his story of Bastogne. And so, Mr. Speranza, I will hand it off to you.
Okay, I think I heard you say for me to go ahead and tell my story. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, do you see me? I don't have that on my screen.
Yes, sir. We can see you. Yes, sir.
Because includes and gestures and so on. I can't help. I'm one of those kind of people who speaks with his hands. All right. So my name is Vincent J Speranza. I was born in 1925 in New York City. You don't have to do the math. I'm 96 years old. And I grew up in a big neighborhood in New York City, an Italian neighborhood. And we did all the usual things that little boys did back then and so on. And never in trouble with the law, but, like bringing snakes to school and putting them down the girl's blouse behind and all other little stuff like that. But we fast forward to December 7, 1941. It was a Sunday. I'm on my bicycle. I'm a 16-year-old kid in high school. I'm on my bicycle and I'm going into a store. When I entered the store, everything was quiet. And I said, hey. And they said, shut up. President Roosevelt is speaking. He's saying something about the Japanese and Pearl Harbor. I jumped on my bike and I ran home quickly. And I said, Pop, quick, put the radio on. There's something. He puts the radio on, and just in time for us to hear, and a state of war exists between the Japanese Empire and the United States of America, and we will win the ultimate victory, so help us God. Well, this vision is so clear in my head. My father turned away from the radio, tears in his eyes, and he lined up his four sons, and he said, listen, boys. Now, my kid brother was only 12, Rocky was 14, I was 16, my older brother was 20. But he lined us all up, and he said, listen, boys, they won't take me because I'm too old. But I expect my sons to, immigrant citizens here were the most patriotic people in the world. They knew what it was like in their own country, and they loved this country when they got here. He said, this nation must not fail. Understand, boys? This nation must not fail. Nowhere in the entire world can a man come here with nothing and look at us today. We have a home and a car and a job, and my kids are all being educated. Boys, he said, this country must not fail. And I believe, ladies and gentlemen, that those became the defining words of my life. I hope that since that day, everything I've done was to help make sure that this country does not fail. Well, right after that, I we were only 16, but a couple of us from the neighborhood with a little hair growing on our faces. We went down to the recruiting office and we said, "We want to join the army. We're 18." Recruiting sergeant said, "Get out of here. Come back when you're really 18." We put our tail between our legs and sneaked out of the recruiting office. At school, we had to wait 2 years before we could get into the fight. And it looked bad. You know, Germany had taken all of Europe. By 1943, when I turned 18, Germany had all of Europe, and it was on our way to Moscow. The Japanese had taken all of it, all the way down to almost to Australia, and you know, we were so anxious. You know, something we got to get into this fight. And so finally, at age 18, 2 weeks after your 18th birthday, the government sends you a letter which says, "Greetings from the President of the United States. Are you coming, or shall we come and get you?" No, they said, "Report to your nearest draft board and sign." Well, we went to the draft board. We signed in, thinking that we were going to get in right then. But no, they said, "No, you go back home and you wait till we call you." And so I, disappointed, we went back home. And it was not until October of 43 that they finally called me and said, "Report to Camp Upton." And I couldn't wait. Uh, we went to the camp with a series. They gave us a series of tests, and then an officer sits down with you and says, "Speranza, you did, 97 something on mechanical aptitude. You like tanks?" And I say, "Yeah." "And you did in math and science. You like the artillery?" Yeah, yeah. He goes through a whole bunch of things that you qualified for, and then takes a big stamp, infantry, which is, what we wanted anyway. That's where the fight is. So finally, we get sent to Fort Benning, Georgia, and you step out of the bus, and a big sergeant comes out there and says, "Hi, my name is Mastorelli. You got it?" "Yes, sir." "Don't give me that sort of crap. You save that for the officers. My name is Sergeant Mastorelli, and I got 19 weeks to turn you little students into soldiers. And by God, I'm gonna do it." He scared the hell out of us. He said, "All you gotta remember is when Mastorelli says jump, you say how high and how far." Well, true to his word, man, he turned innocent 18-year-old kids into something else. by the end of the 19 weeks, we gobbled up that training. We loved it, and he said that. Well, he said, I think you'll do all right when you get out there. So we're saying now, okay, we're going to get into the fight. No, you got to come back for 4 more weeks of advanced infantry training. And then we finished that. No, you got to come back for 2 more weeks of heavy weapons training. Heavy weapons, by the way, is what are called machine guns and 60 millimeter mortars for infantry guys. Well, we finally finished all of that. Are we getting to get into the fight now? No. First, you have to be assigned to a line outfit, and so they assigned me to the 87th Infantry in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Okay, now, right now we're gonna get into war. Um, no maneuvers in Tennessee, jungle training in Florida. When the hell are we going to get into the war? Well, uh, one day they took us out to a big field. They said, there's going to be a demonstration today. We said, what kind of demonstration? Shut up and sit down. So we sit down. 3 C-47s come out of the sky. We see the doors open. We see guys throw themselves out of the door with little white things opening and floating them down to the ground. And they roll up their parachutes and they come running up to double time up to us. They lined up in front of us. Big, beautiful guys with shiny silver wings and shiny jump boots with pants bloused in the pants. Only paratroopers were allowed to do that. And the captain comes by and says, "Listen, this is the United States Parachute Corps, and we're looking for a few good men. You have to have had your 19 weeks, your 4 weeks, and your 2 weeks of military training. Who wants to volunteer?" Well, we were, uh, but throw yourself out of an airplane. He said, and there's $50 extra a month jump pay. Hands went up. Okay, they took 7 of us back to Fort Benning now, and for jump training, and again, we got the best training in the whole. You can't believe the confidence they built in us and the physical condition they put us into. We were ready to take on the whole German army by ourselves. Well, no fooling around after that. Right up to Camp Bumpton and a trip on the Queen Mary, which was a troop ship then, and to England and to France, Camp Mormelon, where the 101st Airborne Division was just coming out of Market Garden after the beating that they took, and it was supposed to be in camp now for 90 days to get resupplied, ammunition, replacements, and rest and recuperation. Yeah. Well, when I got there was November, the end of November, and the division is sort of settling into the rest and recuperation. Well, it was not to be. Nobody knew about it, neither British intelligence or American intelligence. Uh, Hitler had saved up 25 divisions. There's 18,000 men in each division. 9 of those divisions were panzers. The tank with their newest tanks, the Mark IVs and the Tiger Royals, and they surprise attack on December 16. They opened up on the Ardennes line. The Ardennes line at that time was held by four American divisions. That's, the idea was to, from the sweep through Belgium and capture Antwerp. Antwerp was our port of entry where all our supplies, ammunition, and so on came in. And they would have denied us if they had gotten to Antwerp, they'd have denied us our supplies and, of course, have the supplies for themselves. And it would have also split the British and Canadian armies in the north from the American armies in the south. And it would have changed the war. But their problem was that to get from Germany through Belgium to Antwerp, right about here in the middle, was a little town called Bastogne. And that town was just a small village, really, 6,000 people. But it was a transportation hub. It had 5 roads going into it and out, and 2 railroads. And so, in order to get to Antwerp, they had to take that town. And Eisenhower must have said to the 101st Airborne Division, even though you're not ready, come as you are and get up there to Bastogne. And I remember that day, it was December 17. The Germans had smashed the 4, we didn't know, of course, but they had smashed those 4 units, destroyed them as fighting units, and were on their way to go through Bastogne. Well, about 4 o'clock in the morning, I guess, the lights come on, and the sergeant's on, all right. We said, you're crazy. The ground is frozen. We'll all break our legs. He said, you're not jumping. You're going to go up in trucks. Oh, yeah. And then from all over the barracks, Sergeant, I don't have a rifle. I was a machine gunner without a machine gun. All I had was a trench knife when we went to Bastogne. And we don't have Sergeant, quit complaining. We'll do something. We'll get it on the way. Get on the trucks. Well, it was a nightmare ride all day and all night, and jammed into trucks. Like in my book, I describe all this stuff in detail. And that ride was one heck of an experience, because there were no stops. The weather had dropped down to 0, and we only had our summer clothes. We had not been issued our winter clothes yet, and no gloves, no hats, no galoshes, nothing but our summer jackets and cotton pants. And those stupid combat boots that they gave us. They made us turn in our jump boots and put on these combat boots. I'll tell you about that later. But the story was, we got to Bastogne one day before the Germans hit. Just enough time to set up a perimeter. And, we were short like 3,000 men. There was supposed to be 12,000 men in the 101st Airborne Division. There was only 9,000. But there was also 1 battalion of the 705 tank destroyers and 1 battalion of the 10th Armored Division with 73 tanks. The Germans had over 1,000. We had 73. And we, personally now, after all day and all night in that truck, we were half dead. You get off the trucks and the officer said, all right, about 5 yards apart and watch out for snipers. Now we're walking into this town of Bastogne. We didn't even know where the hell it was. We said, where are we? Finland? Norway? I don't know. Beat the heck out of me. It wasn't until 2 or 3 days into the fight that we found out we were in Belgium. At any rate, the officers lined us, hey, dig a hole right here. And, the ground was frozen and the tree roots under it took you half the damn night to dig a hole. As soon as you figure you get into there, sergeant comes around. All right, we're moving out. Oh my God, we gotta go dig in over there. Well, I said we go dig into there. Now you really did, and you're positive now that you can't move anymore. And the sergeant comes around. Sorry, we're moving out. We gotta, they were adjusting the positions. And the third time we just scraped the snow side and the hell with it lay on the ground. We spent. No matter even how young and strong you are, there's only so much you can do. The next morning, now this was my first combat. I got a nice light machine gun from the. By the way, those of us that were unarmed, when the stragglers came through Bastogne to go to the rear, we just we said, "Hey, buddy, look, you're going back. You don't need." We took the rifle right off his shoulder, and we went to his pockets, got any grenades and so on. So all of us that did not have a weapon had one before that first fight, and so we. Uh, Sitting in those foxholes, and when we woke up, the fog was all the way down to the ground, and the fog starts to lift, and like a whole blanket, all at once, the fog starts to go up, and you can see down the river, and it goes up a little higher, and you can see, and finally it gets up high enough for you to be able to see all the way down the field, and what we see is sort of opening, and then the world exploded. Artillery more. See? The ground shook. The artillery was making holes all over the place, and so on. And then the sound that infantrymen hate the most is the grinding of the tanks and wheels and so on. And at any rate, to go back to my first combat, and there was nothing you could do except stick your nose down in that foxhole and said, curse yourself for not digging it deeper. But the tanks pop out of the woods, and now the tanks are firing point blank into the foxholes. When they hit one, the guy disappears, and the rifle goes floating around in the air and come back down again. And the noise, the artillery, it was the scariest damn day I'd ever lived in my life. And they were expecting, when tanks are pushed, they'll rush to quit, run, surrender, move out, so on, like the other four divisions did. And but they didn't know it was the 101st Airborne Division in this town, and we just ducked our head in the hole. We let the tanks go by, and when the German infantry showed up, we plastered them. They were expecting to just romp up the field behind their tanks, but they got a big surprise. Well, when we slaughtered the infantry, and what it's not nice to say, but a machine gun is delight. All knots of men outlined against the snow, and the snow turned red. We did a lot of damage, and the tanks now, when the infantry is not behind them, have to turn around and go back. And on their way back, McAuliffe's artillery just plastered them too. And so their first attack, frontal attack, failed. By the way, they never tried another attack like that again for the 8 days of that battle. At any rate, they went back, and we were all pumped up that we slowed them back until we turn around and look at our, oh my God, you should have seen the the damage they did to our guys. We lost a lot of men that first day and the whole time we were in there. The story was what they decided to do after they got stopped from the frontal attacks is surround the town, and they uh, captured the field hospital, which is in the rear of the town for us. But all the beds, blankets, equipment, morphine, everything that was in the field hospital, they now had. They shot all the American personnel except the doctors. They kept 5 of our doctors to serve in their army, and one doctor and one Belgian nurse escaped to the town. And so for that whole battle, our medical team was one doctor, one Belgian nurse, and only his own personal equipment. Uh, there was no place to put the wounded. The uh, ground was frozen. We couldn't bury the dead. The very bad for morale to see our guys in frozen bodies laying on the back of the church. Whatever the story was, the men that got wounded were just thrown on the floor of the church. The church and the seminary across the street from the church were the only two buildings in the place that still had walls. The Luftwaffe had come in that night, and the German artillery flattened that whole town, and they had hoped that that would be enough for us to quit. But this is the 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles who don't quit. And so the as I said, the second day they surrounded us, and we had no place to put the wounded. We put them in the church, in the Florida church. My buddy got hit in both legs. His name was Joe Willis, and my sergeant sent me back to the headquarters there to see if we could get some batteries for the radios, the little walkie-talkies that he needed. And while I was back there, I went to look for my friend. Now, the story I'm about to tell you had like 15 billion hits on the internet all over the place, and I am more famous for what I did in this story than what I did with my machine gun the whole war. The I go look for my friend. I see him laying on the floor of the church there. I said, Joe, how you doing? He said, nothing. I got just a couple of pieces of shrapnel in the leg. I'll be out of here tomorrow. I said, really? He said, yeah, I'll be out tomorrow. Or the next day. I said, well, that's great, Joe. Hurry up. Come on. We need you. I got to go back. Anything I can do for you before I leave? He says, yeah, go find me something to drink. I said, Joe, where the hell am I going to find you something to drink? We're surrounded and cut off. There's no supplies, nothing coming in here. He said, go look in the taverns. Joe, the taverns are all boneless shit. Go look in the taverns, you might get lucky. Now get the picture. It's snowing hard, not the gentle snow, it kind of cuts your face. The wind blowing, the artillery is dropping in all around the church there, and I'm slopping down the road there looking for a tavern. And the first one I went into, all broken glass, and there was nothing. I went further down the road. The second tavern I went into still had a bar. And when I pulled the beer handle, beer came out. I said, I looked around for a bucket or something to put the beer in. There was nothing. I took off my helmet. The same helmet you use in the foxhole, I switched a little snow in it, and I filled it up with beer. Back to the church. I said, hey, Joe, I got some beer. Whoa. So he sits up, and I'm feeding him the beer from the helmet. Hey, give me some of that. Hey, give me some of that. Hey, give me some of that. I was like an old mother cow there, giving all these guys a mouthful of beer. I ran out. Joe says, go get some more. Jesus Christ, Joe, go get some more. Okay. I go down, fill up the helmet. This time, as soon as I stepped out of the door of the tavern, a shell landed nearby. It knocked me down and spilled my half of the beer. But it didn't hurt. I didn't get hurt. I got up, and this time, when I went back to the church, standing in the doorway like this, was the regimental surgeon, Captain Walkman. I'm a private, He says, what the hell do you think you're doing, soldier? And I just, bringing aid and comfort to the wounded? He said, you stupid jackass, don't you know I've got chest cases and stomach cases in there? You give him beer, you'll kill him? Get out of here before I have you shot. Yes, sir. And put that helmet on. I was not only freezing, but now I was wet and freezing. But I ran like hell back to the foxhole before he changed his mind and had me shot. Well, an incident that happened during the war. And hell, when I came home from the war, there's all the incidents. This one got murdered. You forget half of them, so on. But not this one. 65 years later, in 2009, when I went back to Belgium for the first time since the war, I went to see the old battlefields and so on and so on. My daughter was with me. We don't know anybody. We just decided to go back to Bastogne to visit the battlefields and the cemetery, pay my respects to the guys who were buried there that day. And we run into a big Dutch paratroop officer. His name is Marco Killian. And he says, sir, you were here during the war? I said, yeah, I was here during at Bastogne? I said, yeah. With the 101st? Yeah. He said, where have you been? There's so few of you left. We want to honor you. And so on. He said, Bastogne has never forgotten the 101st Airborne Division. There are monuments to you all over the town. There are dinners every year. He said, all men and women put on American uniforms with a Screaming Eagle patch, and they reenact the battle and so on. He said, we would love to welcome you and honor you. And he said, who were you with? I said, H Company, 501 Regiment. He said, I can show you where H Company was dug in on both sides of the road. He said, we have studied the war every day, where, who was, and so on. And I said, no kidding. He said, yeah. So he said, you and your daughter get in the car? And he picked up a friend of his, Johnny Boner, a Belgian tank commander, and they drove us out of town. I see the church. I said, hey, the church. He said, on the way back, we'll see that. But he drove me out of town, and he stopped. And now, I recognize nothing. During the war, it was all snow. There's no landscape, anything to remember. And I didn't recognize anything, but he said, look. And then he shows me. H Company was dug in. Here, 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 and on the ridge. And then he looks me in the eye and he points to one and he says, and that was your foxhole. I said, get out of here. I can understand you knowing where H Company was dug in, but how the hell do you know that was my foxhole? He said, because your company commander, Captain Stanley, when he turned in his after-action reports, he had a small diagram on the back of a piece of K-ration cardboard with where he had put the automatic weapons. You were the only machine gun in the third platoon, right? Yes, sir. And look, MG, You. Now you have to picture this. You're 85 years old, and somebody is saying to you, where you're standing right now, 72 years ago, you were a 19-year-old kid with a machine gun waiting for the first German attack. Everything that I had tried to forget about the war came back and hit me right in the face. I even heard the artillery again. I when you're 85, you don't have the control you had anymore. I fell apart. My daughter pulled me aside. She said, Marco, listen, my father's seen enough. We'll come back tomorrow. I said, okay. And they said, yeah. So on the way back to town, I asked the guys if I could take them to lunch. And they said, yeah. Well, uh, we go to my hotel, the dining room there. And at lunch, I ordered 3 bottles of wine. I said, I don't like the mood. I mean, we got to feel differently here. And so now you know the result. You put 3 soldiers and 3 bottles of wine together, and we got loud, and so everybody's looking. My daughter's embarrassed, and so on. And they start telling stories. And Johnny Boner starts talking about the Belgian tanks, and Marco starts talking about fighting in Bosnia and Iraq. And when it was my turn, I told them the beer story that I just told you. While I'm telling the story, they're going like this: You were the GI that brought the beer in the helmet to the. I said, yeah. You when the church with the helmet full of beer and you're giving it to the wounded guy? And I said, yeah. They said, man, they said, don't you know you're famous in Europe? I said, what the hell are you talking about? They said, waiter, come here. The waiter comes over. They said, bring us 4 bottles of airborne beer. The waiter goes out and he comes back on a tray. He has 4 bottles of beer and 4 little ceramic bowls in the shape of a GI helmet. This is airborne. And the label on the bottle of beer shows an American paratrooper with a helmet full of beer going like, let me go get one, excuse me.
I don't want to go to my 9:30 meeting.
I'm sorry I missed the first part.
Oh, it's been unbelievable.
Can you see it? Nod your head.
Oh, there we go. Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's the helmet. This is the bottle of beer. Can you see the label? Nod your head.
Move it up a little higher. There we go.
Can you see it? You see the label? He said, nobody thought that was a true story. That was just a myth. So a Belgian brewer about 20 years ago just decided to honor a mythical GI, and he made airborne beer. We can't believe it. It's a true story, they said. And in fact, the guy who did it is standing right here now. And I said, yeah, maybe I should get a cut on the beer, right? No, but when I went home, they gave me 6 bottles of beer to bring home. And as soon as I got home, I got a call from the statewide newspaper, Journal Register here in Illinois. And they said, we heard a story about you. Could we come interview you? And I said, yeah. So they come to my house, and the reporter interviews me about this story and so on. And they had a photographer, and they took a picture of me behind the 6 pounds of beer. If you, on your cell phone, if you Google airborne beer, and what will come up is that picture of me with this beer. So they put it on the front page of the newspaper the next day. Somebody took it from the newspaper and put it on the internet. As I said, I have 2 Bronze Stars, 2 Purple Hearts, the French Legion of Honor, the Dutch. I have 15 million medals. But I am better known for what I did with a helmet full of beer than what I did with my machine gun the whole war. Uh, back to the narrative. We fought in Bastogne for 8 days. Things looked bad. We were running out of food, out of ammunition. We were freezing to death. We lost all kinds of men to trench foot and da 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 da. But on the 23rd, the sun came out and our planes could fly, and they resupplied us. The Germans continued to try to blast us out of there with artillery day and night, day and night. The Luftwaffe come in 3 times, but we didn't budge. On the 26th of December, Patton came in, broke the line. We got our wounded guys out, and now we were ready to go on the offensive. And we did some damage to the German troops all around us at Houffalize, and we thought, now with the siege of the book, we're going to go back to some nice warm barracks, get winter clothes and so on. No. Eisenhower had a different idea. He said, no, he said, you and the 82nd Airborne are going to be the spearhead of the wave pushing the Germans all the way back to Berlin. And we said, thanks a lot, but at least hot showers. No? For the rest of January, we had by January 19th we had broken out of the Bastogne area, and by the end of January we were sweeping through northern France. We had a big fight at Houffalize, a big fight. This is in Belgium, and the Beaujac's Woods, and then for some reason, I guess politically, the Russians in the Middle East, the Middle Europe, and so on, they sent us to Czechoslovakia and Austria, and then Bavaria, southern Germany. We were like firemen. We were on trucks. They moved out there. We think there's Germans over here, and the Germans are now retreating back to Germany, Berlin. And we kept taking casualties, even it's limited warfare. Warfare is never limited if you're being shot at. And Berchtesgaden, in Germany, when we got to Germany, it was the first town that we weren't getting shot at. They had all put out white sheets and things there indicating surrender. That was in May. But there's something I have to tell you about before the end of the war. It's April, and we're going through Germany, little fights here and there. And one place they stopped the trucks and let us off. They said, listen, we think there's a bunch of Germans in the woods there. You got to clean out that woods. And so, skirmish line, fixed bayonets, 5 yards apart, and walk through the woods. There were no Germans. The foxholes were all empty. But as we continued to advance, we noticed a smell. further we went, the stronger the smell got. And don't forget, we were all 18 and 19-year-old kids. What we saw when we broke out into the clearing just it blew our minds. We had come across a concentration camp. To just break out into an open field and then see this whole big scene, 12-foot high barbed wire fences, double fences all around, two big gates open, and on the right hand side, the bones are still smoking in the ovens. On the left hand side, there's a big shed like with cubby holes with one person in each hole. That was their quarters. Half of them hanging out dead, some of them still moving. I get emotional. It's 76 years now, but I can't help it. The bulldozer had dug a big hole in the middle of the compound. The bulldozer was still there, and piled at the other end, thrown like garbage. Get a pile of garbage. Bodies, all sizes, babies, this one, all skin and bones on the inside, old men, old women. And what they were going to do was just push him into the hole and cut him before, but we got there too. So nobody could walk, but there were some still alive, crawling on their elbows, grabbing our feet, kissing our boots. And some of the guys just slipped down on the floor and started crying. Other guys just started shooting the rifles up in the air. Other guys, in fact, most of them just kept going like this. No, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. How could one man do to another? How and what killed us was the realization these people hadn't done anything. They were not criminals or anything. They didn't refuse to serve or only because they were Jews. They were just rounded up and thrown into these camps, starved to death, beat to death, got worked to death as much as they can, and then put into the ovens to get rid of the evidence. You know, in our minds, whatever little respect we had for the German army and the German people disappeared that day. To this day, I haven't been back to Germany. I've been to all the other countries I was in, but I still have this thing. It was illegal. In fact, a court-martial offense. But we didn't take a prisoner from that day on. Not H Company. I don't know about anybody else. He said, you're not beings, you're animals. Deliberately take people and a fight man to man, that's one thing. But babies, old ladies, old men. I guess I've said enough, but I know as a good Christian I should forgive, forget, but I can't do it. You younger people, you do it. Germany is certainly a different kind of country today. You forgive them. Enough said. On the 7th of May, we arrived Berchtesgaden. And I told you that it's the first time we got to that we weren't getting shot at. They had put out these white sheets for signs of surrender, and we entered the town with no fight. And the we heard about the Eagle's Nest, and we went up to the Eagle's Nest. The Eagle's Nest had, bomb had hit it, so the stuff was scattered all over the place and so on. And we were picking up souvenirs here and there. I got two nice books about Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich. And an incident that just brought like a flash to me. Up on the wall, there was a map. It was like 3 feet by 5 feet. It was a map of the world, color coded, 3 colors. Brown was Germany, green was Italy, and red was Japan. Folks, the cocky bastards had already decided how they were going to divide up the world. They were positive that they were going to win and that this is the way the world was to be settled. Germany was to get all of Europe and the Ukraine up to the Ural Mountains in Russia. Germany was to get all of Canada and the United States. Italy was to get Africa and South America, and Japan was to get all of Asia, including Australia. That was the picture of the war. Had we not won. If anybody had why it had to be won, there it was on the wall. There it was on the wall. And so if I had any presence of mind, I'd taken that map, I'd be a millionaire today. But I got the smug satisfaction of knowing that I was part of the people that frustrated that plan. And the war was over. We had to stay for a few more months while the American troops, occupation troops, came in. And in December, I came home, marched in the parade with the 82nd Airborne, and got discharged. And that's the end of my story. I think I went too long, but I get wrapped up when I start telling these stories. Now, what I see here is, I wish I could stay. You're a beautiful man. All the love and respect possible. Your presence. Thank you. Are there any questions that I can answer? What did I do after the war? I became a school teacher. I taught American history in the high schools of New York City. And I stayed in the classroom 20 years, although offered promotions up and then, no, once you leave the classroom as an administrator, you're not a teacher anymore. I stayed right there in the classroom and taught American history right to the last day. And in the early days, I could look the kids in the eye and say, hey, listen, this isn't out of a book or from reports. I was there, and this is what happened. And the students that came out of my class were patriots, I assure you. And by the way, I have a big talk to it. It used to be they're messing around with what America really did and what it did, and so I became a school teacher and put in 20 years in the school system in New York. Which concentration camp? It was Kaufering, a satellite of the Dachau prison complexes. Satellite of Dachau, yes, the satellite of Dachau.
What was the name of that camp?
Kaufering.
Kaufering?
K-A-F-F, I think, E-R-I-N-G. Kaufering. By the way, let me tell you a good story. I was in California speaking at the Plains of Fame. They set up a tent for veterans who wrote a book, and veterans and other people who wrote books. And we got 15 minutes to tell our story, and then you could sell your book, autograph books. Well, I'm telling my story, and when I got to this part about the concentration camp, the guy sitting next to me reaches up, grabs my arm, and goes, "Vincent," he said, "I was in that concentration camp." He said, "I was a 13-year-old Jewish boy from Romania." He said, "They had taken my whole family, 16 people, and killed them all." He said, "And the last one to be pulled," his book is called My Brother's Voice. "The last one to be pulled out was my brother." And he kept saying to me, "Stay strong, stay strong." And they pulled him out. And then they came for me and they beat me. And he said, "I was in a coma ready to die. And then you boys," and he's crying now, who grabbing my arm and hugging me, "you boys came and they rushed me to a hospital. And when he autographed his book for me, he put down, 'To Vincent, my hero and my savior.'" My God, you talk about emotion and emotional moments and so on. Guy that, of course, we didn't know it then. He was in the camp. I was one of the soldiers that were in the camp. Do I remember his name? Yes, Stephen Nasser, Nasser. Yeah. Once I started in 2009, I've been there every year. I go every year to Europe to the three main battles that the 101st Airborne was in: Normandy, Holland, and Bastogne. And this year's the first one I missed because of the cold. Were you able to stay in touch with all of some of the men you served with? No. I got in touch with some of them much later, but I should tell you this. When I came home from the war, I was 20 years old, and I'd been through the business. I was not the 18-year-old kid that I went into the war with. One of the things that I remember as a kid growing up in our neighborhood, there were the guys that came back from World War One, shell shock, nightmares, personality changes, beat up their wives, and so on and so on. And I remembered that distinctly. The day I was discharged, it was in New Jersey, coming on the train to my home, saying, "Well, now the war's over. What are you going to do?" And I actually looked at myself in the mirror at my mother's house when I got there. I said, "You are not going to be one of these guys that comes home with nightmares and shivers and flashbacks, and you're going to take all this stuff for cutting people in half with a machine gun, put it in the back of your head, lock the door. You can't forget it, but you can isolate it and not think about it." And my friends, I was very successful. I did not join any military organizations. I didn't do the American Legion, the VFW. I had nothing to do with the military. For 65 years, I didn't even know about these celebrations that were going on. So I met a nice woman. I got married. I had 3 kids, 8 grandkids. I got 5.5 great grandchildren today. But for the first 65 years, I had nothing to do with the military or celebrations of the war. That one day that I went back, changed my whole life. You know, now I'm running around all over the world, making speeches to women and living it up. They call me Scotch and Cigar Speranza, and I urge you, if you are interested, to just Google my name, and there are all kinds of video clips and on YouTube and so on and so on to show that I don't only make speeches and go to ceremonies and so on. I also go to the Nuts Cafe and drink scotch and drink with the boys and smoke cigars. We have a good time. We have a good time. Well, reading books about Nazi extermination of Jews does not compare to actual stories. How can anyone deny the Holocaust? You're absolutely right. They have to be insane when whole divisions of men saw these things with their own eyes. And then again, twice I've run into survivors of the Holocaust, and we're able to talk to them and hear their stories about their families and so on.
I don't know if you can hear me at all, but thanks. This has been awesome.
I heard part of that. P.O. Box 234, Old Illinois 62615. Right.
All right. Well, thank you.
So, Randy, shall we wrap it up?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.